So why does our behavior affect our attitudes? We now know that it does, but what's going on behind the scenes to make this happen? So we're going to talk about three main theories here, but cognitive dissonance is my favorite. But we'll talk about all three of these series as for why this statement is true. The self-presentation theory basically talks about the act of expressing oneself and behaving in ways that correspond to our ideals. In other words, it's about impression management, that people put things on social media that might not even match their attitudes, but it doesn't match reality, but it presents itself. If we make a good impression, we gain. Remember, some of the functions of attitudes is to gain material rewards or social acceptance. To have an attitude that doesn't match others is to be foolish. Okay, so I just like the next one. Hold on, I like this one instead. Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. I like to think about this kind of like drive theory that we talked about in the motivation topic. Remember, in drive theory, what happens is that remember, we have some kind of an internal system where we got a comparison. So remember temperature regulation. We had said 98.6 degrees equals, the perfect body temperature. And if my body temperature is less than 98.6 degrees, I'll be cold. And if my body temperature is higher than 98.6 degrees, I'll be hot. Both hot and cold are unpleasant internal states. Almost a tension state is what we're going to use here in a second, but an unpleasant internal state. And I am motivated to remove that unpleasant internal state. And so cognitive dissonance works in much the same way. It's this. I have attitudes, I have behaviors. If attitudes and behaviors don't match each other, I feel an unpleasant tension will arise. If I have an unpleasant tension state, just like hot or cold, I'm motivated to remove that tension state. Okay? So it's really just when things don't match each other, I'm motivated to make them match each other. Okay? So clearly it's got to do with attitudes and behaviors, and when the two don't represent each other, then. Okay? And so in the classic study on cognitive dissonance, this is Festinger's work, Festinger and Carl Smith, but Festinger's a famous one. What they did, let me see. That's really the answer at the end. Okay, what they did was they had people come into a study, and they did the most boring experiment for an hour, the most boring thing they could possibly imagine. It was they had to turn pegs on a board. So it was like turn a peg, move to the next one, turn a peg, next one, next one, next one, next one, next one. And by the time you get to the end, you unscrew the pegs, unscrew the pegs, unscrew the peg. I mean, just holy balls, was that monotonous and boring. Okay. Then at the end of the study, they told everybody, oh man, I was supposed to have a research assistant come in today, and they were supposed to, talk to the next participant to come in, but my research assistant didn't make it today. So could you tell the next participant that's going to come in that this was a really exciting study, okay? And for this service, we'll pay you either $1 or $20. And this is 1956, so even $1 is a pretty good motivation at that point. But we'll pay you either $1 or $20 to tell the next group, okay? Then what's going to happen is later on, we're going to ask them how much they enjoyed the experiment. Okay, how much did they enjoy it? And the fact is, it was boring, boring, boring. Okay, and so what happened was, the problem is a dissonant state has been created. The dissonant state is my attitude towards this experiment was boring. My behavior was telling another human being. And so here is the problem, okay? I have a mismatch between my attitude and my behavior. Is this going to cause a problem, okay? And so according to Festinger, it turns out that the people that were paid $20, they don't particularly have a problem. They're like, yeah, my attitude and my behavior don't match, but dude, the $20 explains it, right? It really does. There's an outside explanation for it. And therefore, the people that were paid $20 when asked about their attitudes said it was boring. Okay, now you take those people that only got $1, and what happens is there's a mismatch again. That their attitude, it was boring. Behavior, I told another human being, and I just don't have enough outside justification to explain it. And so if you've got this internal tension state, if the behavior you exhibited and the attitude that you have don't match each other, you can't change your behavior. It's done. It's a done deal. But attitudes are more flexible, aren't they? You can change. Maybe it wasn't that boring after all. Okay? And so what he found was those who were paid only $1 radically changed their attitude about the study. And so he called that the insufficient justification. If you have the state of dissonance and you do not have enough justification to explain the state of dissonance, then you will change the attitude to make it come closer to the behavior. Okay? That's a really classic study. In ways that are kind of sort of similar, after making important decisions, we tend to upgrade the choice we made and downgrade the choices not made. Okay, it's like once you've made a choice, the grass is not always greener on the other side. Okay, because we don't want to feel dissonance. But if our attitude is that other option would have been better, but I chose this one. You see the problem? And so how can I avoid any such possibility? By changing my attitudes towards the one chosen to making it even better. Okay? And so racetrack bettors that had placed bets were actually more optimistic than the ones waiting in line. Okay? So once we made that choice, we run with it. Yeah, that's all right. So ways to reduce cognitive dissonance. Changing attitudes, adding yeah, you can read all of that, but I've explained some of it a little bit. So adding cognitions, yeah, you can read that. You're big time readers, I'll bet. Self-perception theory is kind of interesting. We got to go back a second and talk about attribution theory. Remember what's happening is I'm going to look at another human being's behaviors, and I'm going to look at the consistency of it, and I can't even remember the other two things, but the idea was I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to create either an internal or an external attribution. Remember, internal is dispositional, external is situation. So I'm going to make an attribution and explain why they did that behavior. Well, self-perception theory takes the same idea, but says in situations when we're not absolutely certain about our attitudes, what we do is we look at our behaviors and we infer our own attitudes based on the behaviors we exhibit. Okay? And so it's really kind of an interesting idea. This goes back to the James Lang theory of emotion. That is, James Lang says we're happy because we smile. Okay? We're happy because the act of smiling leads to happiness. In fact, this is a powerful idea here. It turns out that here, the person on the left puts a pen between their teeth and makes it, they're making a smiling face. They report cartoons as funnier. Or on the right, puts it in his lips and he's making a frowny face and they report cartoons as less funny. And so all of a sudden what's happening is, whether we're aware of it or not, if we don't know our attitudes, we're going to infer them by looking at our behavior as though we are an outsider looking upon ourselves. Okay? So that's a pretty powerful idea, and James Lang theory is good explanation for a lot of stuff. We can talk about the overjustification effect, and that is if you already enjoy doing something and I pay you now for it, it becomes a job. A hobby becomes a job, doesn't it? If you promise to pay a child for playing with crayons, they love it, but if you pay them for doing it, it becomes work. Okay? So here's a cute little story. I don't know where it comes from, but there was once a Jewish tailor who had the temerity. I love it. I copied and pasted this. I would never use the word temerity, okay? But I like it. Temerity. The chutzpah, the balls, something like that. We'll just stick with courage, okay? So there once was a Jewish tailor who had the courage to open his shop on the main street of an anti-Semitic town. To drive him out of town, a gang of youths visited the shop each day, standing at the entrance and shouting, "Jew, Jew!" After several sleepless nights, the tailor finally devised a plan. The next time that the gang came to threaten him, the tailor announced that anyone who called him a Jew would get a dime. And so he gave dimes out to each gang member. This must have been written a long time ago when a dime was actually worth something. Delighted with their new incentive, members of the gang returned the next day shouting, "Jew, Jew," and the tailor smiled and gave each one of them a nickel, saying, "That's all I have today, I'm sorry." And the gang was like, "Well, I wish I had a dime, but a nickel is a nickel." Okay? Then on the following day, the tailor gave them pennies and saying, that's all I have today. Well, a penny? That's not enough incentive. And so what did they say? When the tailor replied that they could take it or leave it, they said, "We're going to leave it," shouting, "You're crazy if you think we're going to call you a Jew for only a penny." Pay him and it becomes work. All right? Come on, now that's funny. Okay? So by paying the gang, the tailor changed the motivation from intrinsic to extrinsic, right? So now they were doing it for an outside reward, and because it was done for an outside reward, it becomes work. And who's going to do that much work for only a penny? Okay? So you take a look. An enjoyable action, no external reward. Guess what? The reason that I did that action is because I must love doing it. Attitude is, I love that activity. Enjoyable activity with an external reward, I must have done it because I got paid. Therefore, it's a job. And yeah, comparing them together. And yeah, this one hurts my head to look at because it's crooked. All right, so that's what we got on material for the first exam. So hopefully y'all are going to get out there and, or you have already, start pulling out the exam study guide. Okay. Remember, on the exams, you are not allowed to use any materials other than your brain. Nothing else. No books, no notes, no internet, no nothing. Okay? Those exams are open for exactly the exam. The final is different, but this exam is open for 60 minutes. 60 minutes. 60. That's it. And after 60 minutes, it closes. It's done. No more exam, okay? So be sure that you are prepared when you sit down. Be sure that you have gotten a distraction-free environment because you cannot pause them and come back to them, okay? All right, so talk to you next time.